Ron Howard has spent more than 60 years in Hollywood, and unlike many who passed through the industry, he has seen it from every angle. As a child actor, he stood under the bright lights of television sets. As a young star, he experienced fame firsthand, and as a director, he observed the machinery behind the illusion. Through all of it, one thing remained constant: he paid attention. And what he noticed over the years wasn't always what audiences wanted to believe. In recent interviews and reflections, Howard has quietly revealed something deeply unsettling. The golden age of Hollywood, often remembered as a time of glamour and elegance, carried a much darker reality beneath its polished surface. The stories weren't loud, and they weren't always spoken openly, but they were there, hidden in whispers, in memories, and in the silence of those who witnessed them. Howard recalls learning very early that fame doesn't reveal character, it hides it. On one of his earliest sets, he observed a major star whose public image was built on heroism and charm, but behind the camera, that same figure created an atmosphere of fear. Crew members avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when he entered the room. It wasn't respect, it was survival. Howard later understood that this wasn't just arrogance, it was control. A way to remind everyone that power belonged to one person alone. As he grew older, Howard began hearing more stories, not from tabloids, but from veterans of the industry, directors, producers, and writers who had lived through Hollywood's most celebrated era began to share what they had seen, and a pattern started to emerge. There were actors who didn't just enjoy fame, they used it. One story that stayed with him involved a charismatic leading man known for his charm on screen. Audiences adored him, studios protected him, but privately, he had a reputation that never made headlines. Young, inexperienced actresses were often placed in situations where saying no didn't feel like an option. The system didn't just ignore, it enabled it. Contracts, publicists, and legal teams worked together to keep everything quiet. Howard realized that this wasn't about one individual. It was about a structure designed to protect profit at any cost. Another story revealed a different kind of darkness. A celebrated actress, praised for her talent and beauty, ruled her sets with intimidation. Each day, she would single out someone, a crew member, an assistant, anyone, and make them the target of her criticism. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. By creating fear, she maintained control. People worked faster, spoke less, and never challenged her. Howard reflected on how this behavior was often excused as perfectionism, when in reality, it was something far more damaging. But perhaps the most disturbing realization came when Howard examined how power extended beyond the set. During a politically charged era in Hollywood, some actors used their influence not just to succeed, but to eliminate others. Careers were destroyed not through failure, but through accusation. Names were given, reputations shattered, and lives changed forever. And those responsible often continued their careers untouched. To Howard, this wasn't just personal betrayal, it was systemic injustice. His perspective became even more personal. When reflecting on the experiences of child actors, having lived that life himself, he understood how vulnerable young performers could be. He spoke about one former child star who grew up surrounded by fame but without boundaries. As an adult, that same individual carried a sense of entitlement that led to deeply troubling behavior. What shocked Howard most wasn't just the act itself, but the response: silence, payments, disappearances. The system moved on, leaving the truth buried. Then there were those who justified everything in the name of art. Actors who believed their talent gave them permission to behave without limits. Howard described hearing about incidents where anger, intimidation, and even threats were dismissed as passion, objects thrown, people humiliated, lines crossed, and afterward, no apology, only pride. It was as if the industry had accepted that greatness required damage. Through all of this, Howard never positioned himself as someone above it all. Instead, he spoke as someone who had witnessed enough to understand a difficult truth. The problem wasn't just individuals, it was the environment that allowed them to thrive. A system where success outweighed accountability, where silence was safer than truth, where reputation mattered more than reality. What makes his reflections so powerful is not what he says, but how he says it. There are no dramatic accusations, no sensational claims, just a steady, clear acknowledgement of what existed beneath the surface, and perhaps that's what makes it so unsettling. Because the image of Hollywood that many still hold onto, the elegance, the charm, the magic, was never the full story. Behind it was something far more complicated, a world where power could protect wrongdoing, where fear could be mistaken for respect, where silence could erase truth. Howard's message isn't about exposing individuals, it's about understanding patterns, recognizing how systems can fail, and most importantly, acknowledging that these stories are not just history, they are lessons. Because if there's one thing his decades in Hollywood have taught him, it's this: the most dangerous problems are not the ones everyone sees, they are the